Hey all, I've got a legend in the field of enterprise excellence on the show with us today, Mr. Stephen Spear. So looking forward to this conversation. We're going to be exploring his new book, Wiring the Winning Organization, Unleashing Our Collective Greatness Through Slowification, Simplification and Amplification. It's such a good topic, and Stephen's kindly given us a companion mini workbook to Wiring the Winning Organization that you can go to the Enterprise Excellence Podcast website and download under resources. You go get that. It's practical, allow you to learn a lot more. And also his book's available on any good bookstore. Let's get to the show.
Welcome to the Enterprise Excellence Podcast, where we aim to help create a better future. Learn from our world's experts how to improve and create enduring, high-performance, low-impact enterprises. Learn how to enhance morale, customer and purpose centricity, focus, and calmness. Learn how to create and sustain a culture of excellence at all levels of your organization.
Welcome to episode 177 of the Enterprise Excellence Podcast. Setting our organizations up to win in today's world, considering the uncertainty ahead, is so important. Many organizations feel stuck, slow, find it difficult to move forward fast enough. It is such a pleasure to have Mr. Stephen Spear on the show with us today to talk about his new book, Wiring the Winning Organization, Unleashing Our Collective Greatness Through Slowification, Simplification and Amplification. Stephen is a senior lecturer at MIT's Sloan School of Management and founder of the company Seed to Solve. He is internationally recognized as an expert in leadership, innovation and operational excellence. Stephen's research has been acknowledged with 5 Shingo Prizes. I'm so looking forward to this conversation on such an important topic. Let's get into the episode. Stephen, thanks so much for joining us today.
Oh, you're quite welcome. And Brad, thanks for the outreach and making time for this. Much appreciated.
Oh, it's such a great book, mate. I'm just so looking forward to the conversation to bring it to our listeners. But the first question I got, mate, is, you've written so many books, done so much work. What led you at this stage to write this latest book, Wiring the Winning Organization?
Yeah, no, much appreciated. So my background, for those who don't know, is I was part of that generation which beating Japan was such a big deal. And after a little bit of wandering around trying to find a good question to ask and a place to find an answer, I had just this really just phenomenal good luck of attaching on to a guy who was a real luminary within the Toyota system. So that was one piece of good luck. The other was having an advisor when I was in a doctoral program who is fully supportive of my very inductive, immersive, sort of unstructured approach to trying to understand what was going on at Toyota. And that was marked by a lot of sort of Karate Kid experiences of wax on, wax off, paint up, paint down to make sense. But the culmination of that effort was to come away with this appreciation of Toyota as an organization which had phenomenal operations, but not because they were only adept at production control or whatever else it was. The primary thing they were adept at was creating an organization which really took advantage of the intellect distributed throughout the enterprise, engaging people everywhere, all the time, doing everything in whatever role to, with great energy, do things so they could see the problems and what they were doing, respond to that in a way that they solved the problems quickly, and then take the local discovery and share it systemically. And that whole attitude of having this really powerful learning dynamic, this generative learning dynamic of seeing problems so they could be solved quickly with rigor and then systemically shared, that was the basis of my first book, The High Velocity Edge. That book was very much about Toyota and came out, let's say, 2008, 2010, that time frame. Well, in the years since, I've had a chance to work with organizations across a very broad span of sector and a lot of different variety and where on the value creation, where in which phase they happen to be, from upstream development and design all the way down through production and delivery. And what came from that work is that as the variety of observations and experiences grew, the core principles shrunk down to fewer principles, but of greater power and importance. And so it came time to kind of take advantage of that and take whatever we had built on with that first article, decoding the TPS DNA, and then adding to it with that high velocity edge book, and building upon that more with this new book, Wiring the Winning Organization.
Oh, that's neat. That's neat. I really love how you've taken this knowledge of broader across through your career and what you've been doing and distill it down. Generative learning, I guess it's an interesting concept that you talk about there, Steve. I guess when you can get that capability of everyone in an organization to be learning and improving every day, it's just natural you're going to get greater outcomes than if only a few leaders are sweating learning and outcomes, isn't it?
Yep. So, Brad, there's two things that come to mind based on what you just said. One is, there's all sorts of ways in which we think that enterprises compete one with the other. What we try to set up very early in Wiring the Winning Organization is that if you control for all that and look at situations which is kind of level playing field, everyone's got access to the same resources, they're looking for the same opportunities in the market, they're subject to the same rules and regulations, whatever else it is, you still have that clump of people or enterprises which are performing more or less at the same level. Then you have the standouts. And when you start doing sort of by the process of elimination as to what separates the standouts from everybody else, it's their ability to engage the intellect of the people in the enterprise, because that's all that's left, right? It's the management system which explains the variety of outcomes. Now, one last thing in terms of, and it was something you referred to, very influential in my own career, not only my own career, but in my development as a person, was my relationship for about 20 years with Paul O'Neill. Paul had been the chairman and CEO of Alcoa. And when he retired from there, he became very, very active in the Pittsburgh community around improving healthcare. And later he became Secretary of Treasury for the United States. And during his tenure at Alcoa had a huge number of fantastic achievements. One of the great ones was that they took the chance of getting hurt on the job any day from 2% in a given year down to 0.07%. It was a 95% reduction in risk to their workforce. At the same time, they increased yield, they increased quality, they were able to do this across the whole enterprise, et cetera. And I remember when Paul would be asked how they accomplished so much change across this behemoth of an organization with hundreds of sites in dozens of countries and a workforce which ran into the tens of thousands. Paul gave an answer. He said, look, on any given day, and this is particularly true in heavy manufacturing, his competitors and the leaders of those competitors, they would look at the workforce coming in the door and say, all right, glad you're here, punch in. There's a locker, hang up your coat, put away your lunch, and put your brain away for the day and bring your brawn onto the shop floor. And Paul said, all we did, and that's big air quotes, all we did, he said, when those same people came in, we said, please hang up your coat, please put away your lunch, but whatever you do, make sure you bring your brain onto the shop floor. And when Paul would explain this, he said, look, what a huge advantage I had, because in all those other organizations where they were telling everyone to check their brains at the door, so how many people did they have left to actually see and solve problems? Handful. He said, every day when we invited people to bring the best of their ingenuity and their creativity onto the shop floor, we had a team of tens of thousands. And he said, on any given day, if your team is tens of thousands and the other team is 3, you're going to win, and you're going to win repeatedly. Yeah. So anyway, Brad, I really appreciate your reference because it reminded me of this great American, Paul O'Neill.
It's too true, isn't it? And I think too, Sam, on that topic, that in Australia anyway, the topic of psychological safety is so big at the moment. But I don't know that too many people understand the power, if you can actually achieve that, what it can result in, because it's basically bring out the thought and brain of every person at work and there's the safety to share. And, I think a lot of people are seeing it as a negative. And it's like, whoa, no, there's the secret of excellence there, is to create that environment. Stephen, in your book, you've written about 3 high-level elements in the title: Slowification, Simplification, and Amplification. Do you mind taking us through these elements and how you bring them out in the book?
Yeah, so absolutely. So, thank you for the question. So it ties right back to this, the paradox we're trying to explain. All else equal, how is it that some organizations are just so much better able to generate and deliver value to society than their counterparts? We come back to this issue, well, if all else is equal, The only thing different is the management systems, and in particular, how those management systems engage the people inside the enterprise to come up with ever better answers about what to do, why to do it, and how to get it done. And so once you lock into that a good management system is one that engages human creativity well, and a bad management system is one that doesn't engage human ingenuity and creativity well, then you start getting into the question, well, what are the things that inhibit or enable the engagement of human creativity? And so early on in the book, we make a contrast between what we call the danger zone and the winning zone. And the danger zone is all those things that make it really hard to engage human intellect. So make the problems wildly complex, give the person trying to solve the problem no control over the situation, so they actually can't run experiments and gain experience, make things very, very fast moving, and so on and so forth. Anyway, we lay out all these factors that characterize the danger zone, where it's really hard to come to a meaningful understanding of a situation and a way to resolve it. So the winning zone is all of that, but the opposite, right? So then this ties into the mechanisms, which is, we then said, well, how do you move yourself out of the danger zone into the winning zone? And we said, well, there are 3 things you can do. So the first, let's go with slowification. The first is, and I'll explain why we picked that word. Daniel Kahneman, the Nobel laureate, had a book called Thinking Fast and Slow. And Professor Kahneman talks in that book about all the kind of fast thinking we do, the impulsive, the reactive, the intuitive, etc. And he says, look, that all has a time and a place. And actually, it helps us get to a good, effective answer quickly. But there's a caveat, a qualifier. In situations that are familiar, for which we already have developed a meaningful, useful answer. But as Professor Kahneman warns us, in situations where things are unfamiliar, we don't want to be impulsive and reactive. We want to be creative. And creative thinking is slow thinking. So in the book, we picked on this fast thinking, slow thinking thing and said what we want to do is create environments where people can engage the slow thinking part, the creative, generative part of their creative thinking, rather than the impulsive. We call that slowification, trying to take people out of the fast-paced, high-risk, highly demanding performance/execution environment and give them the opportunity to have that creativity in a feedback-rich, it's not like you just write things out, but in a feedback-rich planning environment and practice environment. And so in that section of the book, I think in section 2, we give all these examples where thoughtful leaders did just that and made committed time and protected space for people to engage their slow creative thinking and not feel compelled to just give instinctual, intuitive, reactive answers to hard problems. So is the first one.
Yeah, nice. That's nice. So it's basically setting up that forum that I guess people at any level can break away from the day-to-day whirlwind and actually think. That's right. And work through ways of actually slow thinking.
Right. And I think we've all had the experience, whether it's personal and experience, we've had the experience, we've observed the experience where that's not allowed, and particularly under pressure, where someone says, oh, no, we're too busy to actually take time to solve problems. It's like, well, the reason you're so busy is because you haven't solved the problems and you're carrying forward into performance execution the inadequate solutions you have. So all you're doing now is trying to repeat insufficient solutions with greater energy and commitment. In that section, we open up with a couple of good examples, but one is a former student, this guy named Adam Traina, a former MIT student, who had assembled a sailing team to go off and race in some fancy regatta. Thing was, no one knew how to sail other than Adam. So when they got to the regatta, they agreed that they were going to slowify. They didn't exactly use that term, but they'd go out and during the heats, and if they ran into a trouble, rather than just continue to persist doing the wrong thing, they would stop sitting there bobbing on the water and try to solve the problem, teach the skill, and move on. So the next one and the next one. Well, it turns out that they got clobbered in the first heat and clobbered in the second heat. By the third and the fourth heat, they were actually in the front of the pack. They didn't make the finals that year because of the first race or two. But the second year they came back and they won. And the third year they came back, not only did they have a new crew, but they had a new captain. But because they had made this their ethos, this was kind of their competitive doctrine of when we see a problem, we're going to stop and solve the problem in a slowified way. They won the second year, the third year, the fourth year. And finally, the sponsor said, look, you can't come back because we have to give medals to somebody else. So anyway, that's where the slowification comes in.
It's too true, isn't it? And I'm just picturing that image of that caveman pushing the wheelbarrow with square wheels, and you got someone there with round wheels or something. It's like, no, I'm too busy. Too busy.
I'm in a rush to get somewhere. I don't have time to put the round wheels on. Yeah.
It's so common, but isn't it? We just get caught in that whirlwind the day to day, and the whirlwind just becomes our norm rather than.
That's right.
It doesn't have to be that way. As long as you can slowify and break out some time to actually, think and run improvement to
That's right.
Tune that whirlwind down. And
That's
then
right.
the next part of the book you talk about is simplification. What do you mean by simplification?
Yeah. So we talk about these three mechanisms that you mentioned. So slowification is the intent of slowification is to make it easier to solve problems. Whatever the problem is, we're going to take that deep breath. We're going to step back, create this protected time and space to give ourselves the iterations, the opportunity, the control. So slowification is make the problem solving easier. Simplification, in contrast, is to make the problems themselves easier to solve. And the common theme in simplification is to take big, huge, hard problems and partition them into smaller, more manageable pieces, obviously with concern that the architecture allows the small pieces to then reintegrate. Now, as far as that partitioning, we have a number of examples in the book. So, for example, there's the, quote unquote, geographic partitioning of very large systems into smaller pieces. This is a very big deal in software now. So whether it's Amazon and their web services and this API, or Google and their container system, the whole idea is to take these behemoth systems, which are unmanageable because of just their sheer complexity, and break them into smaller pieces where smaller teams are dealing with a simpler local system, where they now not only can deal with a smaller local system, but now you have a lot of teams that can work in parallel with far less burden of coordination cost. And so we give a bunch of examples on that. The other one we talk about, and this ties back to the Toyota thing, is that the way Toyota takes processes and incessantly linearizes things, and then has this very strong discipline about standard work, step by step by step by step. It's also a way to partition this very, very long flow, which might have blurry or ambiguous handoffs step to step, and having such great clarity that the team working on this step has a lot of latitude, a lot of independence of action to see problems and solve problems locally without disturbing the rest of the system. So anyway, we go through that chapter or that section of the book. We must have about a dozen different examples of illustrating how one goes about taking these big, hairy, unruly, highly intertwined situation and deliberately breaking it into smaller pieces, so each piece is easier to resolve, and it gives the people responsible for each piece the opportunity to work with some independence of action, work in parallel.
Yeah, and I understand I'm heavily involved in that agile world, and I know the beauty of it there, the fact that you can they've got autonomy. There's no delays. There's no waiting. They can just execute and improve within that small piece. But Stephen, I've rediscovered training within industry recently, and I've been doing some further research on that. Had Hugh Valley on the show a while back. But, you think, I understand, and correct me if I'm wrong, I understand that some of that learning in Toyota and how to structure processes and train and develop actually links back to that Second World War type training and development approach from the USA. Like, I've enjoyed learning about training within industry and its origins and things like that too, how to break the complex down into simple.
Yep. Yeah. So that's actually a fine example, because you think about what that is to develop a standard And the reason to have a standard is because it's the best known approach to succeed. But the other part of having a standard is it makes it more obvious that there's something amiss, right? If I mean that's why you pick up a cookbook and it says cook till ready. Well, what do you even do with that, right? Cook till ready. I've never made this before, so I don't know what ready means. But on the other hand, if you have a cookbook with the same recipe or the same dish, and it says cook till a certain temperature, well, I can measure to a temperature, or cook until the top has a certain, it's golden versus brown. All right, that's a little ambiguous, but better than cook till ready. So this training within work, it has that beauty of connecting to this idea, the dual use of standards. It increases the chance of success, raises the upside, and also decreases the chance of prolonged failure because you can see problems early and often. So it limits the bottom side. But the other part about the training within work is that it represents how we acquire skills, which is we need the sets and we need the reps, right? So it allows for that. And then on top of that, it recognizes that we tend to learn things incrementally. Like no one, everyone says, oh, I know how to ride a bicycle. But the truth is you never learned how to ride a bicycle. What you did is you learned the component skills, like when you were a baby, how to sit up, then how to balance, then how to, move your hands enough to gain some control, and then how to, scoot along on something which is otherwise stable. And eventually the skills come together and you are riding the bike, but you never learned to ride the bike. You learned one little step as a foundation, and then you learned on that foundation, you add another one, and another one, and another one, and then you have the sophisticated skill, which you never learned riding a bike. And I think this training stuff is also respectful of that part too. So it's the value of the standard, but also how do you train to a standard in context, incrementally, through repetition, and boom, 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 you can become quite competent.
Yeah. The other story I find interesting on it is how many people look at the word agile and just go, oh, we do agile. We just do what we want, when we want, how we want. And it's like, well, no. Agile is a highly structured, systematic process that people constantly practice and work to improve and share within massive communities to constantly get better. And like, it's the system gives you the agility. It's the result doesn't just happen. But boy, that's a big misconception out there in a lot of places.
Well, Brad, this confusion of a term to describe the outcome, that this is an agile system, as opposed to thinking that that's the behavior, right? Oh, well, we'll just do willy-nilly. It's like, all right, well, willy-nilly is a code for or a synonym for random, and random doesn't provide a stability, reliability. There's the same confusion on the term lean. When back in 1988, it was an MIT graduate student who invented the word lean based on his the research for his master's thesis. What he was trying to do was describe, draw this contrast between this handful of Toyota final assembly plants and everyone else. And he commented that when you looked across all of the mass production of automobiles, there was a certain level of labor and capital equipment and inventory and this and that. And what this fellow John Krasik noticed was that, in contrast, there was this handful of plants that had much less stuff, but they were still making more product. And so for him, lean was descriptive on the outcome, right? Oh yeah, they're lean because look at all of that they can do with such few resources. And then there was the whole issue of how do you become lean, and that's our argument. It's behavioral. You become lean through the behaviors of seeing problems, solving them with rigor and speed, and systematizing, sharing what you've learned. But like with Agile, like you were describing, there's a lot of people who confused lean as an outcome with lean as a behavior. And so what they did is they fired people and got rid of inventory, expecting somehow that would improve performance. And not surprisingly, it was not so effective.
Oh, no. And now you say lean to most middle managers or frontline crew, and they're like, oh, that's about cutting heads. That's about cutting jobs. Right. I know. Yeah, it's like, wow. I know it's crazy how that happens. And unfortunately, it does damage a lot of great systems and leadership behaviors that could really help companies. But yeah, it's human nature, I guess. Now, in the final...
in the last couple of years, I reread Taiichi Ohno's book on the Toyota production system. He first wrote it in '78 in Japanese, and It's translated into English in 1988. And, Ono's point is that what they were doing at Toyota, which was sort of the inspiration for Lean, was they were using those techniques not to cut headcount, but to grow business so that they'd have more work for people, more useful things for people to do. It was just the opposite of that, is that by doing these things, they justified and not justified, but created the opportunity to give useful employment to more and more people. And you see that when this system was invented in the 50s and 60s, Toyota was a tiny little company, and now they're the most successful auto company in the world for like decades.
Yeah.
So
and they've got the policies all through that time with lifetime employment. Like I studied that back at uni in Japan, lifetime employment.
Yep.
Like you don't head cut around a policy of lifetime employment.
No.
Well, I think the other question I've got then, Stan, is the piece of amplification, because I guess like a lot of people are making rash judgments or positions purely on I want amplification. I want the results. But like you're saying, you need the slowification to be able to give the time to solve the problems. You need to simplify the way that things are structured so that people can more easily, effectively work rapidly on smaller problems. But then what do you mind explaining to us this amplification piece then?
Yeah. So again, re-anchoring this in the paradox we're trying to explain, which is all else equal, certain enterprises having far greater ability to generate and deliver value. And we say it's because of their ability to engage human intellect, creativity, ingenuity far better than everybody else. And so the first two things we described was this process of slowification to make it easier to solve problems. And then we said there's this other element of simplification to make the problems themselves easier to solve. So where does amplification come in? Is to make it abundantly obvious that there's a problem that needs attention. And there's overwhelming evidence that the organizations which are aggressively seeking problems while they're still little and local don't allow those problems consequently to become big and systemic. It turns out when we were writing this book, we discovered there's a whole lot of good math and sort of communication theory and control theory that also validates and backs up this idea of making sure that problems are seen and swarmed and solved and contained when they're little and local before they have a chance to become big and systemic. But anyway, that becomes another characteristic. In fact, I'll just offer, let me pull the book out here. We had the good fortune that here we go, I think it's in focus. There we go. Almost, ta-da. Right. Anyway, the foreword was written by a fellow, John Richardson. He was a 4-star admiral, and he was the chief of naval operations, the 31st chief of naval operations for the United States Navy. So he's the top sailor. He writes this beautiful foreword in the book. I recommend it highly. And what Admiral Richardson says as he goes through the foreword, he starts describing his own career as a leader, from a junior officer up to a more senior ranks. And he says, he starts recounting in hindsight how whenever they had successes, that the successes started by using these mechanisms of slowing down to engage the problem, breaking the problem into smaller pieces, and so on and so forth. Midway through this forward, he wrote a great piece. And I'll send you the excerpt of it if you want to share it with your viewers and listeners. He says,
please.
But how do we make sure this doesn't happen? He says, how do we make sure this doesn't happen? And he says, the first thing is if we allow amplification to degrade, that the less able we are to see problems while they're still small and local, the less inclined we'll be to slow things down to solve problems. And if the less inclined we are to slow things down, the less opportunity we have to do the simplification. And so just as there's this self-reinforcing dynamic, this virtuous cycle of slowify, simplify, amplify, there's this destructive doom loop of de-amplify, accelerate versus slowify, and make more complex or leave complex rather than simplify. So anyway, like I said, I'll send you the excerpt. It's beautifully well said in terms of how to make this stuff either go in a very positive direction or quickly go into a crash.
Yeah, Sam, I really appreciate it. So I think a number of our listeners would be listening to the show, and I think it's so clear what you're mentioning. It's very clear, very simple. I think a number of them will be sitting there going, but I'm in chaos at the minute. We got so many problems, so many issues. It's just chaos. Where would you recommend, considering Slowification, Simplification, and Amplification, where would you recommend these companies that are just completely out of control at the moment, where would you say for them to start?
Yeah, so something we talk about in the book, and we even created a separate supplement, I'll share that with you also, is this idea of starting with a model line. And what a model line is it starts off with a small microcosm of the much larger enterprise. It could be a single person working on a single product. Point of the model line is to use that small controlled space as an opportunity to make it more, to amplify, to make it more obvious where the system is breaking. And then in an environment where you can deliberately slow things down, you can start trying to figure out, why is the system failing this locality, and how do I repair it? And then take what I've discovered here and sustain it and spread it. But there's another piece here, and there's a whole lot of advantage. So let me keep going with this. This one thing is that it may sound silly to pick a microcosm, but if you're in an environment with tremendous chaos, basically what you're doing is you're squandering a huge amount of resource and energy all the time. And if you get a little pocket of stability, that returns immediate dividends in terms of time liberated, attention liberated, emotional energy liberated, resources, physical energy liberated. There's another part of this, is that in order to get that liberation of time and energy and other resources, you've given people who are involved in this model line microcosm, to your point about training, they've gotten sets and reps, and they're like, oh, that's how to build a system, and that's how to operate a system, and that's how to improve a system. So we're always getting better and better engagement of the people who are part of the enterprise. So the model line, if allowed to then expand, becomes this source of capability then, which then becomes self-reinforcing. Anyway, long and short, Brad, sorry for all the words, is that I think very often people look at a big, large situation and say, oh, the situation is so out of control. What do I do? The answer is simplify, right?
Yes.
Break down. Do you have a small piece? Now that you've got a small piece, you can slowify. Now that you can slowify, now you can build capability and start applying the capability onto other portions of the larger system.
That's nice. I love it, Stephen. What a beautiful answer, mate. That was perfect. I love it. Mate, with leaders now, we're talking to senior leaders of an organization or any leader, and you've got 2 minutes in the elevator with them, mate. You're up in the elevator with them. What would be that 2-minute tip you'd give them in relation to, creating a winning organization? What would you say to them?
Yeah, first thing I'd say is things can be much better than they are right now.
Yeah.
And as an aside, you'd want to know what it is. Your productivity could be double what it is today. Your safety risk could be 1% of what they are today. Your reliability could be X-fold what it is today. At that point, you'd hope that the leader would say, really? Are you kidding me? And if not, how? So now you're into about 10 seconds of it, right? And you say, well, here's the problem. You've got an environment right now which is so chaotic that people are spending time and energy just trying to make sense of the environment they're in, and it means that they can't actually spend invest their creativity, their ingenuity on the problems for which the solutions will give you rewards. And they're like, yeah, all right, that seems like a familiar situation too, and it's true. Anyone who's running a factory, any kind of facility, a studio, whatever it is, a hospital, if all they do is, Brad, one of the things we talk about in the book is what's the diagnostic for needing to improve? And people will come back to you with like all these metrics and reports and this and that. It's like, no. Just walk into the work site and ask yourself, how much gracefulness do you see in the execution of the work versus how awkward and difficult does the work look to be? All you have to see is a little bit of awkwardness to know you can get better. And because associated with the awkwardness by the people trying to do the work is disappointment on the part of the people who depend on it. So anyway, back to your elevator thing. I don't know if you need 2 minutes. You say, look, took a look at your company, what your performance is and what it needs to be. And you can be, whatever you're doing, you'll be 2, 3, 4x better than you are now. And the question is how? It's like, well, the reason you're this is because the mechanisms you have in place right now to turn individual effort into a well-integrated, harmonious collective action, they stink. And what's the evidence that they stink? Just go look at people doing work, and they're spending a huge amount of their time hunting and gathering and looking for the resources and the directions they need to do something meaningful rather than spending most of their time doing something meaningful. So that's part 2. So we have the incentive, we have the evidence, and then what do? It's like, well, you have to pick a local place and start figuring out what's broken about the mechanism and repairing them. And as you repair them, take what you've learned from that and then spread it. So I think we can get it down to about 30 seconds.
That's
and for
awesome,
the interested leader, and for the interested leader, by the end of the elevator ride, they want you to come out and visit. And for the uninterested leader, if you still have a minute and a half left on the elevator ride, I don't know, you can check your email on your phone.
Yeah, that's awesome, Steve. Really appreciate it. That's a great way to go about it. I'm sure for leaders listening to it's like, it's simple but not easy, is it? But really grabbing the book, reading the book, and taking this approach you're talking about will help you get there.
Yeah.
Then how can people reach out to you, mate, get hold of the book and gain some more help if needed?
Oh, yes. So I appreciate that. So, just Google for me now, because with the launch of the book and the software company are trying to get going, I'm pretty pervasive on LinkedIn and elsewhere. But a simple email, drop me a note at Steve at either hvellc.com. That'll come to me. Or like I was saying, we created a software company, very quick and easy to use tools that help bring into much greater ease of use these ideas of simplification and amplification. Just visit our website there. It's c2solve.com. C like vision, SEE 2TOSOLVE.com. And check us out there. Yeah.
And we really appreciate it, mate. Well, then thanks for everything you have done, mate, and everything you continue to do to help us create a better future, mate. Really appreciate it. It's been a pleasure.
Oh, likewise, Brad. First of all, thank you for making the time, especially, given the time zones and all. Linking up is not an easy thing. The other thing is I want to say thanks to you and, others like you who create these webinars and podcasts and that sort of thing, because fundamentally, what our community has realized long ago is that leaders really have an opportunity to create much better conditions for the people for whom they're responsible, for, and they have an opportunity to create much better conditions in which those people can come in every day and do something of great value that is appreciated by other people. And what you and folks like you do is share with leaders who wouldn't know otherwise what to do, how to do it, why to do it, how to get it done. And so the multiplicative effect of your efforts is really to create a much better daily experience for thousands and thousands of human beings who otherwise might be in a really difficult struggle every day. So thank you.
Appreciate it, Stephen. I had a builder once who's a family friend say to me, Brad, you spend a lot of time, most of your life at work, mate. If you can have a great time at work, you're going to have a great life. And I've taken that theory on to everything else. How do we help everyone else have a great time at work and come home fulfilled? Because it also flows into the home life, doesn't it, Stephen? No matter how much people want to say it doesn't, it flows into home life.
Yeah, Brad, indulge me with 2 quick stories because it's exactly that. So back to my mentor, Paul O'Neill. Another way he answered the question, Paul, how'd you have such huge transformation at Alcoa, such a sprawling enterprise? He said, really, it's just a matter to, the first part was thank the bodies for bringing the brains, as opposed to telling the brain, the bodies to leave the brains at the door. But then, how did he know the brains were fully engaged? He said 3 questions. 1, ask everybody every day, when you came to work today, did you feel prepared to succeed? And if they said no, then you as leader have homework for tomorrow. Second question, which is when you did your work, did you feel like your efforts were appreciated by someone whose opinion you care about? And if the answer is no, we got homework for tomorrow. The third question Paul said he asked was, were you prepared to succeed? Were you appreciated? But also, in doing your work, did it give you a sense that you added value to your own life? And if the answer to that was no, that meant homework also. So you start thinking, and I want, just want to tie it to your point about, our experience at the workplace we carry home. So Paul's that did it add value to your own life? Yeah, you carry that home. One last story. So Gary Convis, he's retired from Toyota, but he had the distinction of being the first non-Japanese president of a Toyota site. And along the way, he first joined Toyota when they did this joint venture with General Motors, and where they had this huge, profound turnaround. So anyway, Gary tells a story, and I think I have it in my first book, The High Velocity Edge, where Gary's at some sort of company function, and a woman comes over to him and says, "Oh, are you Mr. Convis?" He says, "Yes, I am." She said, "Mr. Convis who runs this facility?" "Yes, I am." He says, "Do you work here?" He says, "Oh, no, I don't." She says, "Okay." She said, "Well, it's nice to meet you. Why'd you approach me?" She says, "I want to know, what did you do with my husband?" And Gary's like, what do you mean? What did I do with your husband? He says, "Well, here's the thing. My husband, back when he worked for General Motors management, he'd come home at the end of the day. He'd come in the door. He was very grumpy. He'd plop down in his, his lounge chair or whatnot, turn on the TV. He'd ignore me, maybe demand that I get him a 6-pack of beer. He'd drink the beer, fall asleep. Maybe he'd make it to bed in the evening, whatever. Then the next morning he'd get up and he'd trudge off to work before this whole cycle repeated." And Gary said, "Well, I'm really sorry about that." He says, "But I still don't understand." Well, she says, "It's so unusual. Now, at the end of the day, a man walks in the door who looks exactly like my former husband." Gary's like, "What?" He says, "But this guy is so much better. He comes home. He says, 'Hey, honey, I'm home. How was your day? Ooh, did you do your hair? What smells so delicious? What are you cooking for dinner?' Tell you, why don't we pack it up and go have a picnic at the park? I'll pick up a bottle of wine that we can share there together." And then he says nothing but nice things till we go to bed. And then the next morning he wakes up and he says, "I can't wait to see you at the end of the day." So anyway, Gary Convis is hearing this story and he says, "I'm not really quite sure I understand your point. And what do you want me to do?" And she says, "Oh, no, I don't want you to do anything. Whatever you did with my husband, you keep him. I like the new guy."
It's too true, isn't it? It's why we do what we do. It's why we do what we do.
So
yeah,
anyway,
we'll see. Oh, thank you, mate. I really appreciate it. And it's a top read, everyone. So thoroughly recommend this book and the past books of Stephen also. And mate, you're a champion, Stephen. Thanks again for helping us create a better future, mate.
Absolutely, Brad. And thank you for everything you're doing to push this stone up the hill. Much appreciated.
Cheers, mate. Bye for
now. All right. Yep. Bye.
What a great episode. Remember, you can visit the website Enterprise Excellence Podcast to download the Wiring the Winning Organisation Companion Mini Workbook. That's a practical approach to putting this into place. And also, Stephen's books are available on any bookstore. There were 2 key takeaways for me from this episode. First of all, the big one was slowification. Creating the environment and times when people can think slowly. Break out of that fast thinking, go. Think slowly, take time to truly understand a problem and solve it at the root cause. The second key takeaway for me was simplification, which involves making problems themselves easier to solve by breaking the big into the small. Taking these huge problems, huge projects, huge challenges that we've got and breaking them down into small pieces that we solve piece by piece. Stephen provides so many great insights on how to do both, improvement in both areas of slowification and simplification. And to me, these are at the baseline of then amplification, which Stephen also covers. Thanks again for your time and knowledge, Stephen. Thanks for helping us create a better future. Bye for now.